Somewhere in your body right now, there is a reflex older than language. Touch something you believe is contaminated, even for a second, and some part of you decides it is contaminated forever. Wash the cup. Throw away the shirt. The logic doesn't matter. The feeling remains. Now hold that reflex in your hands and look at a painting. Not through your eyes only, through your skin, your gut, the same ancient wiring that once told your ancestors what was safe to touch and what wasn't. Because somewhere behind the paint you're about to see, there is a substance your body would still recognize, even now, even across 2 centuries, as something to recoil from. Lead, mercury, arsenic. Not metaphors, not symbols of darkness. Actual poison, ground into powder, mixed with oil and worked into canvas by a man who touched it with his bare hands every working day of his life. His name was Francisco de Goya. And what you're about to learn about his paint will change, just slightly, just enough, the way you look at everything he made. Picture the studio, not the gilded halls where he painted kings and queens, but the workroom behind them. The place where color was made before it was ever applied. The white came first, always. Lead white, soft, luminous, endlessly workable, was the foundation of his palette, and by every technical account he ground it himself, batch after batch, year after year. Fine dust rising with every stroke of the mortar, settling on his hands, his sleeves, the air he breathed for hours at a stretch. Lead is a neurotoxin. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates, quietly, invisibly, in the nervous system, the kidneys, the blood, until the damage is no longer quiet at all. Then came the red. Vermilion, brilliant, saturated, prized above almost every other pigment in Europe, is mercury bound to sulfur. It recurs across his entire body of work, in the flush of a court portrait, the collar of a uniform, the drapery of a duchess. Beside it, a warm yellow he reached for again and again, a compound of lead and antimony, glowing and stable, and, like the white beneath it, quietly cumulative in the body of the man mixing it. And once conservators examining a single surviving portrait, a Spanish nobleman named Ramon de Pignatelli, found something rarer in his hand, orpiment, made from arsenic, one of the most lethal elements known to any century. Not his usual choice, which makes it more unsettling, not less. Proof that even one afternoon's decision could carry that kind of risk. Decades later, alone in a farmhouse outside Madrid, painting images so private he never intended anyone to see them, Goya was still working with the same materials. Conservators studying the walls of that house have identified lead white, mercury vermilion, and arsenic-bearing orpiment worked directly into the plaster, alongside the black. Whatever had already been dismantling him from the inside, it never stopped him from reaching for the same jars. By then he had been deaf for almost 30 years. In the winter of 1792, when Goya was 46 years old and near the height of his career as a court painter, something in his body broke. For months he could barely stand. He described violent head pain, ringing that never stopped, moments where the room simply vanished from his sight, and a heaviness in his limbs that made walking downstairs a genuine accomplishment. Slowly, most of it passed. The vision returned. The strength came back. But the silence didn't. For the remaining 35 years of his life, Goya heard nothing at all. No physician's record of his case survives. Everything historians know comes from his own letters and the letters of his friends, describing a man who could no longer trust his own footing. For more than 2 centuries, historians and physicians have argued over what happened in that room. Early biographers reached for syphilis, the default diagnosis for almost anything mysterious in that era, a theory most serious researchers have since abandoned. Others pointed straight at his palate, lead dust in the air of his studio, decades of daily exposure, a slow poisoning finally reaching a threshold. More recent medical reviews have proposed something else entirely. Rare autoimmune and inflammatory conditions that attack the inner ear and the small vessels of the brain. Conditions with names like Vogt, Koyanagi-Harada disease and Susak syndrome, or a straightforward infection, meningitis, encephalitis. None of these theories has ever been confirmed. None has ever been fully ruled out. As recently as the 2000s, medical journals were still overturning each other's verdicts. A diagnosis accepted for decades quietly discarded, replaced by another nobody had seriously proposed before. 2 centuries of trained observers, looking at the same fragments of which means every painting Goya made after 1793 is the output of a nervous system whose exact injury nobody has ever been able to name. Here is the part that has nothing to do with Goya, and everything to do with you. Somewhere in the last few minutes, something shifted in the way you're looking at these images, even though nothing about the actual paint has changed. The pigment in a 200-year-old painting is inert, sealed under varnish, bound in dried oil, sitting behind glass in a museum that keeps it climate-controlled and untouched. There is no meaningful way for lead or mercury or arsenic in a Goya to reach you, standing in front of it or scrolling past it on a screen. And yet, now that you know it's there, some part of your mind treats the painting differently. This isn't a flaw in your thinking. It's one of the oldest habits your brain has. Long before anyone understood chemistry, humans operated on a simple, powerful rule. Once something touches a source of danger, it carries that danger with it. Permanently, invisibly, regardless of whether any actual harm can still occur. A glass that touched something disgusting stays undrinkable even after it's washed. A shirt worn by someone despised stays unwearable even after it's laundered. The same instinct doesn't ask for evidence. It doesn't care that a Goya painting has been safe to stand in front of for 2 centuries. It only registers contact. Which is why, on the wall of the house, he bought under a name that was never really his. The house of the deaf man had belonged to a deaf stranger before him. The crouched, wild-eyed figure of Saturn feels different once you know his hand built that darkness out of lead, mercury and arsenic, the same materials that may have been dismantling him from the inside while he worked. The painting hasn't changed. What changed is that you can no longer look at the color without also sensing the cost of it. Every pigment fades eventually. Lead whitens, vermilion darkens, verdigris turns to a strange bronze green nobody intended. But the meaning underneath a painting doesn't fade the same way. It accumulates, the way lead itself accumulates, one exposure at a time, until you're standing somewhere you didn't expect to be. You came to this video to learn about paint. What you're leaving with is something closer to a new reflex, a small, permanent adjustment in how your body responds to old beauty. The next time you stand in front of any painting old enough to have been made with real metal and real risk, notice what happens in the half-second before you even think about it. Notice the tiny hesitation, the flicker of something between admiration and unease. That flicker isn't about the artist. It isn't even really about the painting. It's about you, and the part of your mind that has just quietly decided it can never look at a surface the same way again, once it knows what's underneath it.